So now I just call the meeting to order. So I will call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor House.
Here.
Mr. Amline.
Here.
Ms. Greenfield.
Here.
Mr. Green.
Here.
Mr. McQueen.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Here.
Mrs. Amaro.
Here. Notice of this meeting was provided to the Bernardsville News, Courier News, and the Star Ledger, filed with the municipal clerk, and posted on the municipal bulletin board on December 27, 2021. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, before we start our presentations, many of you probably already know, last week we lost Ed English, who has given so much of himself to this community. So if we can just take a minute of silence for Ed. Thank you. What we're doing tonight, we're having a presentation concerning the dam. And just to give you some background of how we got here, we started in 2021 discussing the option of either removing the dam because of some of the environmental impacts, or of doing whatever we need to do to bring it up to DEP standards. We've had a number of engineers looking at this. We did a bid for engineering services. They had to do quite a lot of testing for the sediment and soils that are in the pond, which involved removing or reconstruction issues. In March of 2021, we awarded a contract to Rippled Waters, and they developed a testing plan for NJDEP approval. And we got the approvals in August of 2021. In the meantime, in April, we had a site meeting to discuss the options, and I believe Dr. Hammond was there as well, myself, Christine McDonald, and Bill Kibler of Raritan Headwaters, Paul Ferriero and Mark Denisiak of Ferriero Engineering, Johanna Wissinger, who is the chair of our Environmental Commission, Beth Styler Barry from the Nature Conservancy, and Beth Friday of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. It was quite a crowd that day. They were all pleased that we were moving forward with parallel tracks of tracking removal versus replacement. So we have since gone through all that, the studies. We attended, I can't think of how many webinars. Doug did, put in a lot of time learning about all the options, what's going on in other parts of the state and the country in terms of dams. The pond has, Paul Ferriero, our engineer, confirmed that the pond has 0 storage capacity, so it is not a flood control dam. A removal would be designed to be neutral with regard to flows. As for water quality, the removal actually helps clean the water because it increases the scouring of the downstream areas. So for hazard mitigation, it's would eliminate some of those. And according to Fish and Wildlife, they were talking about funding options. If you remove the dam, there are some grants that are available to help with that. There are not for repairs and replacement. So this has been a good year or more of investigation and research and studies. So culminating in tonight's reports. And we have first Mary, is it Pace?
Yeah.
Goldman, who is with Rippled Water Engineering, and she is going to present all the research she has accumulated.
Okay, thank you. Share my screen.
Can everyone see that?
Yes, thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. So I'm Mary Pace Goldman with Ripple Waters Engineering. And I am gonna go through what we did with in terms of evaluation for removing the dam, present some cost information, present conceptual ways that the dam could be restored, and then also talk about some funding options. So this is just an overview of the pond. This is from Google Earth, just to give everyone orientation. It's obviously right outside here, so hopefully everyone is very familiar with this at this point, but I wanted to share this just so you can see, you know, kind of the landscape. We have the rail corridor here in the foreground, the pond itself back here with the dam, and then there's the exit stream channel below that has trees on both sides in that little beach. So if we proceeded with the dam removal, there's a number of benefits associated with these types of removals. Primarily, one of the largest ones is maintenance, cost reduction, and then liability and risk. With the maintenance associated with the structure, there's both compliance with dam safety regulations from the state of New Jersey, but also maintenance dredging for accumulated sediment that comes into the pond. And we know from working with Borough that dredging is needed every 8 to 10 years. So that's about $500,000 cost each time that the lake is dredged. So we would be looking at that as a long-term commitment. Yeah, so that maintenance cost is something that you have every 10 years. And obviously there would be inflation associated with that, but that's sort of the current rate. Liability wise, you're responsible as a dam owner in New Jersey to have periodic inspections. Those are on a schedule that's published by the statute. It requires an engineer to come out and do an inspection of the structural integrity of the dam, as well as look at the hydraulics and the hydrologic capacity of the structure, identify any maintenance needs. Typical maintenance can be anywhere from, you know, concrete repairs to removal of trees, filling in alum burrows, you know, any number of different things that go along with that. Also the risk with dams of this nature, when it's on what's called a run-of-the-river structure, you have potential for people to enter the water, whether in a boat or just fishing, and then you have potential for drownings, and those are all things that are tied into the dam itself. Restoration of fish habitat is a really good benefit. Right now, any fish that would want to migrate up through the corridor are stopped at the base of the dam. There's no fish ladder or other means for them to get up over that structure at the height it is. So you really lose the potential for fish to kind of migrate through. You also have a limitation on the type of fish that will survive in the pond itself because of limited depth, the water quality of that water. Fish that would normally inhabit Mine Brook are more limited. You're not going to get trout, for example, in that stream in the pond. The other good benefit is water quality improvements, which I know were just mentioned. A big one is reduced temperature. When we get rid of the impoundment, we see an immediate shift in terms of aeration, which adds oxygen to the water, but we also have a reduction in temperature, because what happens when it's sitting there and you have a hot summer day, the water heats up. It's not conducive for a lot of the native species. Again, we lose the fish, we lose the macroinvertebrates, we lose all those other species that are sort of native to a stream channel that just can't thrive in a ponded setting. And then another one is the free flowing movement of sediment and debris. With the dam in place, it creates an artificial obstruction that holds sediment behind the dam. So what happens is it starves sediment out of the stream channel below that would normally come in. And certain species also rely on sediment movement through a river system. So it's not always, you know, clean and empty. You have deposits that form and they flush out in another event and then they come back again. So you have sort of this natural aggradation of material and degradation of material that goes on in a stream channel. And by taking the dam out, you restore that free flowing sediment movement. The other thing that is a benefit is getting rid of the risk associated with long-term regulation changes. You're obviously, impacted right now by dam safety rules as well as flood hazard rules and freshwater wetlands rules. The dam safety rules in particular have changed over time. Obviously, since the dam was constructed, the hydraulics in particular have been significantly changed. One of the reasons for some of the overtopping protection measures and things that Ferrer was going to speak about in their presentation came about from changes to the hydraulic requirements. Rainfall patterns and rainfall amounts have changed over time. We're seeing that, and dam safety adjusts their regulations to reflect that in terms of what they require for spillway carrying capacity and outlet structure calculations and things of that nature. So if you keep it, you will always have that. If you were to remove it, you get rid of that sort of long-term regulation because dam safety would close out their file. You no longer have a regulated structure, so there would no longer be compliance and inspections and all this additional hydraulic analysis required. Freshwater wetlands and flood hazard area would still be, regulating the site. Obviously, it's still going to be a stream. You're still going to have some wetland impacts. However, you would be looking at more minor things. You would have things like bank stabilization, vegetation that you want to put into riparian zone, things of that nature. All of the restoration focused work is encouraged and supported by DEP. And so that's a much easier path in terms of regulatory risk than additional work on dams. They require pretty significant alternatives analyses and justification for work on man-made structures. In terms of the cons for dam removal, there are a few, so it's worth reviewing those as well. Sediment has the potential to migrate during the removal, always with every one of these structures. I've removed close to 100 dams around the Mid-Atlantic and into New England. And when you take out these run-of-the-river structures, there's always a potential for some sediment to move. And so it's something that you have to be aware of. It's never going to be perfectly contained. We'll put in all proper ENS measures and things like that. But people tend to be concerned when they see a little bit of turbidity move down as you're doing the dewatering and you're removing the structure. With a structure like the one here, we would likely remove it in stages so that you can really control and mitigate any of the sediment that would be moved downstream. And it's not like one huge slug of material going downstream. I don't know if people have ever watched the videos of some of the really large scale dams out west where they take them out for the salmon runs. They just blow them up with dynamite and let all that sediment bridge down to the Pacific Ocean. That's not the way it's done here in the East Coast and definitely not in New Jersey. So we would really be looking to mitigate that sediment migration, but there is always some, so that's something that we just have to be aware of from a public relations standpoint. Obviously, a big one is the loss of the pond aesthetic. People are like the park because they have the pond there. They're no longer going to have that. You're not going to have the same type of birds in there. You're not going to have the same type of fish in there. It will be, a free-flowing stream. So if you're really married to the pond, that is one of those things that takes some getting over. So I don't know if that's a big concern in the community, but it's something definitely to consider because it is definitely a significant change to aesthetic. You'll still hear the audible sound of running water. It will not be the same volume or location as the spillway is now, but you will have what are called ripples in the natural stream that still have a bit of that waterfall effect. So you still have some audible sound with the removal, not quite the same as people looking at the dam with a much larger waterfall. It has a potential to have a higher cost in construction than doing a dam repair. I know we've gone through the numbers, and I think our numbers are actually fairly close, but it is potentially something that I always point out that the construction could come in higher than a repair. There's more involved in a restoration, but it's a single effort in terms of the construction cost as opposed to sort of a long-term effort that would go along with dam. So I do want to make sure I point that out. And the last con here that I have is potential time for dewatering and restoration for it to establish. So the one thing we can't predict is the weather. I've had some dam removals that come out when we're in a very dry period. We don't have any rain And things kind of de-water quickly. We get vegetation established fairly well. And then I've had other dam removals where we're in torrential rains all the time. Everything stays saturated. All that sediment in the former impoundment is very spongy, not really walkable. Takes a long time for stuff to grow in because it just needs the time to dry out. So there's, some risk to, we have no way of predicting what the weather will be moving forward with the removal. So it may take longer than other times for everything to grow in. So patience, knowing that the aesthetic is not going to be pretty immediately because it's going to take time for it to grow in is an important thing. Again, this is a park. We don't want people coming out there and being discouraged that this is a mess and how dare you do this, it's going to look horrible. That's it's a short-term issue for a long-term gain in the end. All right, so on this screen, I have the conceptual removal plan. The pond footprint itself, I'm just going to outline with my laser pointer here slowly. The current pond is actually all the way out here at the edges of these colored shapes. So I'll talk about more in a minute. So that's your current pond, that outline that I just drew. The dam itself is kind of right in this area here. So under the removal plan, we would end up with a single thread stream channel that would run here closer to the railroad tracks. So the railroad tracks on my screen are down here again, kind of similar orientation to that area I had up earlier. So we have this single thread stream channel here that runs closest to that railroad track. The single thread channel is fairly similar in width to what it is currently downstream. And so we would maintain that relative width. That's fairly consistent with what we saw in the bathymetric data. This appears to be pretty close to the original alignment of what the channel was here before the dam was constructed based on the soundings that we had. So we think this will actually want to form in this location when we pull parts of the dam out, if we were to do so. And it made sense actually from a feasibility standpoint at the park also to do it this way because it gives you more access on that left side as you're facing upstream. Yes.
Just a question.
Sure.
If the dam, if it was removed, I'm assuming you restore parkland.
Yeah.
Is there any structural reason why another bridge couldn't be placed down closer to Borough Hall to allow?
No, not at all.
So we can build on that. And
Yeah, you would probably want to add some crossings. We did talk about a replacement of the crossing that's here down here. That's why there's this sort of brownish line that's representing potential placement for new trails, including the one that Borough has pending for the approvals with DEP currently. But we could also expand your trail network to bring residents down close to the stream channel. You could add fishing access points. I usually find it's best if you kind of guide people in a vegetated restoration area to a designated fishing access point as opposed to kind of letting them trample all of your newly restored plantings. But you can add in, whatever you'd like in terms of amenities. You could add benching, you could add all kinds of additional park features in the restored impoundment. This whole large yellow area here, we had talked about grassland bird habitat. It would be a great place for that. You could really do some creative work with wildflowers, and I have a couple of images of some of the native plantings that I think would do well in that area as it's dewatering. It would be pretty dry. Based on the materials that we sampled during the testing, the material is fairly granular, so it will dry out more rapidly than areas where we have higher organic content. There's a decent organic layer on the top, but as you get down lower, you have more of the granular material, so it will dry out more rapidly than clays or silts would. In this location as well, we generally saw that there was a decent amount of native seed. When I pull these kinds of structures out, sometimes you don't even have to see them and believe it, because what was there before the dam was in place will regerminate. So sometimes we have really great native seeds, sometimes rare ones that will crop up on these just on their own when these structures are removed. So I would definitely wait to plant till we see what crops up and then come in into the plantings at a later point. That's typically a good setup for doing this. I do think on this railroad side embankment, an area within this edge of the impoundment on that bank of the stream, we'd be better served to expand the forested corridor. It's already really nicely forested in that area, and additional forest on that side would really be complementary to that corridor. It's a little bit narrow, obviously running up to the tracks, there's a pretty significant, elevation shift, but it would be nice for that side to have that forested canopy expansion. We do have the one small stream coming through underneath of the railroad tracks on that side that would be important to maintain. So we will have a small channel that we'll have to construct through the current impoundment to have it connect and as a stable connection to the uniform stream. And the last thing I'll point out on this concept is these two gray and white patterned areas. Those represent in-stream grade control structures. So I mentioned the word ripple before. If you think of a natural stream channel where you have those rocks that almost look like someone placed them there, that's a natural function for streams. If you're a trout fisherman, you already know what I'm talking about, but you have ripples and then you have deep pools. So in a natural stream, you have this running rock, then you have a deep pool where the fish kind of like to hang out and rest, and then you have that pattern repeat itself over and over again down each stream. Every stream has a different spacing for those, but this general location makes sense to have two of those engineered ripples in place. I do think there was probably one at the location of the dam when they constructed. That's where they usually choose to site dams of this era. So I suspect that we may find some remnants of that when we go to do a deconstruction, and that would be good to just then enhance and engineer to make sure that it's not going to move. And the reason you have those grade control structures is to keep the stream from cutting down. And what happens if you allow it to cut down into softer soils is it just keeps going, and then you end up with bank failures and collapse. So we would need to have those kind of structures in place so that we don't have everything continue to downhill. That's my concept overview. Here's some photos from a couple of other projects I've worked on. Up at the top here, this shows during what's called like a bank full flood event. So some of the heavier spring rains we've had recently, that's when you see the water kind of getting up near the top. And this structure in front here where my cursor is one of those engineered ripples. So when you have, heavy rains, it'll be pretty much invisible other than what you can see with the little white water effect on it. And then during lower flows, you'll see the rocks and water will be trickling over them. This particular impoundment had much higher velocities on the edges than I expect in my Brook, so we had some pretty significant rock armoring. I think at your location will be more like the photo on the bottom, where we can use large woody debris. So large woody debris, which people think that's placed there by humans. Yes, they do. As an engineer, I place wood right into the stream. I actually have projects where I'm replicating beaver dams currently for somebody, which is an interesting engineering exercise. That we take wood that's fallen into the channel or ash that we're losing anyway to the ash-borne beetles, and we reuse it in a way to provide bank stabilization. So in this case, the roots kind of look like a fan on the edge where they're facing out towards the water. That's what you can see in this shot here. We bury the log into the bank, usually about 10 to 15 foot long, 1 to 2 foot in diameter, depending on the hydraulics and the calculations. And then we do bank stabilization on top. And we add all these little sticks here into the blankets, which are called live stakes. So those are cuttings from sycamore, willows, dogwoods, and then they leaf out and become nice, rough vegetation that provides instant shade for the bank edge, and also provides a really good, stable resistance for heavy velocities and storms. And then I have this little image here of some of the native pollinators that I think would do really nicely in your grassland habitat. One thing to keep in mind if you go with the pollinator native species is seasonal variation. It turns brown in the fall, so people need to be aware it's not going to look like an ornamental garden and be green and colorful all year long. We have it browns out probably September most years, and then it will come back. So people always say, oh, that looks dead or that looks horrible, but it's part of the natural thing. So if you go any other route, another thing to kind of educate the community on it. So I have the costs here. I can walk through this in more detail, but bottom line, I estimate we're at just about 2.35 million for the total construction with a 10% contingency built in. This includes also some additional things, including removing the 2 small dams that are downstream of the large structure so that you have no regulated dams at all in Brook. I also included some fishing habitat features in this estimate as well, because if you want to encourage folks to come in and fish and potentially have it be a stocking location for trout in the park, adding some deeper pools and some additional fish habitat features working with trout would be a recommendation of mine. So I included that in this anticipated cost breakdown. Also included replacing the footbridges and the construction of the walking trail, which will, I think, correlate well to what Ferrero presents with their numbers as well.
Well, you have two footbridges on there.
Yes. Yep, the one upstream and then the one downstream.
Mary, you talked about 100 or so dams you removed.
Yes.
In retrospect, any of your clients after they removed the dam, what were the regrets? They had any, and what did they say to you?
I never had anyone regret. I had a lot of people who were on the fence beforehand. We had some that were emotionally attached to it, especially some private residents who had, 6 or 7 generations living on the property with the structure, and they could say, like, my great-great-great-grandmother built that. So sometimes we had a difficult time convincing them that it was a good thing to do. After removal, everyone always thought it was for the best and was really pleased with how it turned out. I can't think of anyone who was disappointed. I think some people were unsure what to do with the restoration of the vegetation post removal, and there's always a lot of differing opinions on that. But beyond maybe those kind of comments, I can't think of any regrets.
Yeah, Mary, I had a question. You mentioned earlier about having to dredge the pond every 8 years. I think you said 500,000 about.
Yeah.
If in dredging it, they find some contaminant in the particles they take out,
Yeah.
what happens to that then? Does it get
That
managed?
has to go to a licensed disposal facility. So usually for this part of New Jersey, people tend to take it to Pennsylvania because their thresholds are a little bit lower, but that's still, you have to pay the trucking cost to take the materials there. When we did the chemical testing, everything in the impoundment based on our testing came up clean, with the exception of one sample that showed a slight exceedance in cobalt, which is a metal. We're not sure exactly where the cobalt came from, but I don't think it's going to be an issue if you have to take material out now, because it was in such a small location and it was just barely over the threshold that when they actually do the test for the removal, I don't think we'll run into a concern with that. Yes.
Mary, we talked a little bit in Public Works about the impact on wildlife, talked about the fish. Could you just talk about the bird impact, and specifically when they happen to the geese?
Yes. So with the loss of the impoundment, you will no longer have desirable habitat for the geese. And when we let all this material and this vegetation grow in, there's no more sort of open water area or open lawn area for them to fly in and inhabit. So we'll have a direct positive benefit in terms of eliminating the geese. You'll potentially lose some of the native ducks that might use that area, but you'll also gain other ducks that are happier in a riverine setting, as well as I'm confident of having their income through, because there's a whole bunch of them downstream.
You may have not gotten to it yet, but in Public Works, we also discussed the potential grant.
Yes, that's on my next slide.
I do have a question. When was
Sure.
the last time we dredged?
It wasn't a full dredge.
No, you're right, it's a portion.
Yeah, it was a partial, I'm gonna say maybe about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, this is my next slide on potential funding available. So the first one I listed was the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021, which designates up to 800 million for dam removals. Currently, that's something that the Nature Conservancy, Fish and Wildlife, and several other agencies are pursuing for dams, specifically in New Jersey. I spoke to Beth Seiler about this recently, this project, and I said, we're coming to the point where we're going to have a discussion with council So she said to let her know and she can help out with the funding side as well. I also let Doug know that I'm happy to provide support. I do often grant application support for these types of funds. The next one I have on there is ONRR, which is DEP's Office of Natural Resource Restoration. Depending on any settlements in the watershed, there may be funding available that could be put towards the removal if there are anybody who has a natural resource damage claim pending within the watershed. That's one that we would want to coordinate with our headwaters specifically, as well as TNC with ONRR, but that's definitely an option. U.S. Fish and Wildlife always has money available for removals. They will always guarantee you free plant material for post removal. That's something that's they can give to private citizens. In terms of the funding they have available for the specific removal itself, that varies depending on what they have, but they're expecting a significant influx of money for removals as well, from not only the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, but from several other modifications that are coming down through the Department of Interior. NRCS has funding available for removals through their EQIP grants and several other programs that they have. NICWIF, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, releases grant applications annually. So that's one that we could look into specifically for the project. The grant ask for this region has not come out yet this year. I don't know the schedule off the top of my head, but we would definitely want to pursue that as an option. It's fairly competitive, but with this structure the way it is, and then any additional match that we can pair up from other grant sources or from the borough itself would have a score pretty well on the ratings. Corporate Wetlands Restoration Partnership also always gives money to dam removal. Typically, they cap out around $20,000, but they have given more depending on how long the process takes and what you're pursuing. Atlantic Coastal Fish Habitat Partnerships, another grant funding source that we would definitely want to pursue. I did not list the Highlands Council, but that's another one where you could have them fund portions of the planning. Currently, it's difficult for them to fund implementation, although they're considering switching to offer money towards the construction, but they will definitely provide funding towards permitting and design costs for the removal. And then partners that I think would definitely ones you want to keep at the tip of your stakeholder list is Raritan Headwaters Association, Trout Unlimited, and the Nature Conservancy. And I'm sure that we can come up with additional partners that would want to sign on. Anytime you get a good strategic partnership that also carries a lot of weight on the grant requests from it and Atlantic Coastal Fish Partnership and some of the others.
What's the range of grants?
So grant pricing, grant awards like NICWIF awards money up to typically 5 to 10 million on a grant award. I have one that was funded at 6 million from them. And then U.S. Fish and Wildlife usually several $100,000, NRCS several $100,000, and then the smaller ones like Corporate Wetlands Restoration Partner, 20,000 and things of that nature. So what, that full amount that we threw up there, you obviously have to have some match that the borough is providing, but you could get a significant portion of that fully funded through a grant if you're successful.
You said you'd be willing to lend your
Yeah,
expertise to
definitely
help.
help with that.
And how much does it cost to maintain the dam?
I think that's going to be part of Herrera's presentation.
Jack, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So if we're restoring this to parkland, as we think of funding mechanisms for both scenarios, what items, if any, can be used for the open space fund versus capital? So if we're considering the parkland, if we wanted to go that route, we could.
And I think it's good development of the parkland, so I think we can find.
I'd like to take any other questions. I think I'm done with my
Anybody
presentation.
else have questions for you?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Our next presentation will be Bob Riley of Ferrier. I can never say it right. Is it Ferriero? Ferraro. There's an I in there though. Sounds like Rivero.
Good evening, Mayor. This is Paul Ferrero. I will apologize for the stray I in the name. somehow my grandfather brought that over, but we've never pronounced it.
Okay, got it, thank you.
And my second apology will be that I'm coming to you from Atlanta and I can't be there. My daughter had our first grandchild about a week ago, so we were actually down here for that. Another element of that is I'm going to be shutting off my video to try to save some bandwidth as I go through this.
Okay, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, so Bob Riley will take the other side as to the dam reconstruction. There it is.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be doing that, Mayor. I'm going to be going through the through the various elements of it, of the reconstruction of the dam. And I'm gonna, if I could share my screen, what I want to start with is a couple of images of the dam. This is what it looks like up on top right now, and going back, and this is what the lower end of the dam looks like. You can see to the left side of the image here, that's the existing spillway. And somebody might ask the question, why are we doing what we're doing? Well, because of the hazard classification of the dam, it needs to be able to safely pass a design storm that is very substantial. The 100-year storm in the area is about 8 inches. The design storm we have to design dam for of this class is about 34 inches in 24 hours. It's a very significant rainfall. So what you see here is the dam that exists today, and there's going to be something very different that will be constructed when we're done. I would like to stop that share and go to a video, and this is what I'm hoping will run properly. Hopefully it does not get too glitchy, but we did some images and a flyover simulation of what the dam might look like. And you should see it start to move fairly soon. One thing to note in the lower left-hand corner is you see that semicircular spillway. One thing we have to do to make this dam work is to increase the length of the spillway. And we do that by creating this curved surface area so more water can get over the dam. The area on the right is, as you see there, is really the existing spillway. And now you can see we're zooming in on where the proposed spillway will be. And now we'll get some views from the lower end of the dam. And the intent of the design would be to have the dam finished in a similar way as the existing dam. You can see the stone. This is really just cut and paste images of the kind of stone that's there now, and that would really be part of the elements of the design. And we're gonna spin around. They're gonna go back up top again, and you'll be able to see again the way this dam aligns with the existing railroad property, which is on the right of the screen.
Well, if I may, everything as we're looking at this now, as we're looking at it, everything to the left used to be the earthen part of the dam.
That is correct. That was, if you remember the photograph I showed you at the beginning, you saw the spillway, which is the spillway that you see right there now. But to the right of that first concrete abutment, it's really an earthen embankment. And that's what needs to be protected with the overtopping protection for this 34-inch rainfall.
It almost doubles in size. It looks like.
The length of the spillway actually gets even more than double, because as I said, what we have to do is increase the length of the spillway, which is why we have that large arch there, to create more of an area where the water can come over in these higher events, so the water does not get too deep. That really becomes our control surface, that curved spillway on the right-hand side of the screen. And what I'll do here is I will stop that share and give one more share. And this is really just a series of these images, and I'll keep it on this one, and we can go to some of the more specific images later if anybody has any questions. But as I said, the reason why we have to do this is to make sure the dam is stable for this probable maximum precipitation storm, which is a very significant event. As Mary pointed out earlier, it used to be that you would deal with a 100-year storm or the 100-year plus 50%. Well, now we're dealing with much greater design storms based on the changing regulations of the DEP. So that's what we have, and that's what we're designing around today. And Mary pointed out some of the advantages and disadvantages of removing the dam. In many respects, the advantages and disadvantages of dam replacement are the converse of those. The major advantage is the retention of the pond for its aesthetic and other historic values to the borough. That's probably the main reason for redoing the dam. It's something that's always been there, and that's maybe something that you want to keep. As far as the disadvantages, Mary's pointed out that there is the periodic dredging. The cost of that will vary depending on how much is done. I'm going to go over the cost estimate in a moment and let you know how much we have allocated in this project for that. But we would be doing it as part of this project to do some of the dredging. And the next thing I would like to do, again, I will stop that share, and I will bring up another share of my screen. And this is the cost estimate. And the cost estimate that we've come up with is about $2.7 million for the dam removal, which includes a number of the things consistent with what Mary has in hers, like the pedestrian bridges, but we've also included dredging. In this estimate, we've included $145,000 for the dredging. One of the reasons why that number is substantially smaller than what you've heard before is because it's already part of this. It's part of a much larger project. The pond will already be drained. There will already be the mobilization, and a lot of the other costs are already in there. It's not an independent project with independent permitting. That would all be rolled into this program right here. So again, we're estimating this is about $2.7 million for the dam replacement. Again,
You said removal cost. That was the reconstruction cost, correct?
that is correct. This is the reconstruction cost. And as I said, again, this is what we're going to end up with when we finish. There are 2 pedestrian bridges, as we discussed, replacing the one below the dam. Also, work on the one that exists up on where the stream comes right into the top of the pond at this point. So I will open it up now for questions to see if answer any questions you might have.
When was the dam originally built?
I don't know, but it's Bob, I don't know if you recall the age, but I believe it's certainly well over 100 years old, maybe 150 years old.
Shown on that map you had hanging up in the office. It's not 29. Yeah, it's not a historic dam. It's a copper dam that was built first, and then the spillway that you see now. I think you said it was about 80 years old. Been a dam there. Yeah, it's been a dam there for quite a while.
Yeah.
It was first, like I said, it was a copper dam, and that copper dam is still behind the stone spillway.
Paul, what was the timeline for you for the project?
I'm sorry?
The timeline for the project from authorization to finish?
Well, we would have to, from this point forward, we have to go through the final design and approval from the DEP. And my best guess on that is going to be 6 to 12 months, and that's a very broad range. There's been a number of people who have retired from the DEP dam safety, and we've had permits get hung up there for a long period of time. The length of time of the construction on a project like this is probably 6 to 8 months.
Same question for removal, how quick would it start and how?
Yeah, so for removal, it's the same review timeline as Paul mentioned, so that 12 months is probably pretty good, 6 months on the best case. And then for the removal construction, that depends on how we decide to do the dewatering. So if we notch it, it could take a little bit longer. But I would say, you know, if you took everything out and did it in a more rapid pace, that you'd be looking at maybe 3 months total for construction, and then following up with your supplemental. If we do it a little slower, more like 6 months is probably more reasonable.
What about funding?
Well, I'm trying to time appropriations and.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, so we can't use open space for both?
No, not to remove the dam. We can use it
To remove the dam, we can use open space.
I believe you can also use open space funds for the restoration of the dam. I've done that in other municipalities with dam replacement. Open space funds have been used.
There's no grants
No
available.
grants available.
Oh, makes sense.
There are occasionally the DEP has loan programs available for dam replacement. I have not seen grant programs. Right now, there is not a program open for funding for a loan for dam replacement.
And I think we could consider, just so since we can talk about all options that are possible, we could consider referendum for the other open space funds that are available if passed by referendum for one time. Correct,
Yeah.
Jack?
Yes, you could.
Or you could do it non-binding referendum.
Can I ask a question regarding experience with this? Have you done other dams in the area, and if so, could you just discuss?
Sure, we've done it. We've done a number of these dams. We did a couple of them up in Hudson Farm, up in Sussex County. There were some fairly large dams. We worked on the replacement up there. There was another dam up in Sussex County. I frankly don't recall the name. We also did a complete replacement of the Fox Lake Dam in Rockaway Borough. That project completed was completed probably about 6 or 8 months ago.
And are those the only advantage? You mentioned for us it's aesthetics. Do they use those like to be able to have swimming or anything else in those?
Rockaway Borough uses their dam. They have a significant swimming program. They have a beach in the dam or in the pond that's behind the dam. So it was very important for them to retain the dam and retain the pond. Up in Hudson Farm, those ponds are used primarily for wildlife, for some of the activities they have going on up there. And they're also a very significant aesthetic element of the facility up there.
Anybody else have any other questions? I know Diane, your committee just has already seen this presentation, so do you want to just go over what?
Public Works saw the presentation 3 weeks ago, and we had a lot of questions, and a lot of the answers to our questions were incorporated in the presentations that you saw this evening. The Public Works Committee feels that the best course of action for the borough from both a environmental and a financial perspective would be the removal of the spillway, the dam, to allow nature to do its thing and reestablish the stream to its original stack, the way it originally was.
Anybody else from the committee? Want to add anything? Most of it's
Just taking it out.
Manufacturing.
All right, so where do we go from here?
Should we have no discussion about options, man? What do you think?
Certainly.
I personally think that restoring the stream is a good choice. We're always looking for places for our community to walk and to congregate. And I was looking at Google Maps as we're doing this. We have the Bowl and Terrace project. I think it creates an opportunity to connect the center of the downtown, especially from the lane with the Borough Hall. We'd have to do something with some walking areas if you go by the fire station, but I think we create a really nice walking area for our borough. I prefer manicured parklands versus natural ones, but when it gets to this question, you can have.
Yeah, let me add a couple of thoughts if I can. Councilman McQueen. I agree. I think actually residents would use the park significantly more, potentially with the river wagon. I like the options in it that there were different points of access, ways to potentially fish. I like restoring some of the environmental habitat, the birds, the various fish, wildlife. I do think that the geese impact negatively the usability of the space. The other thing that we talked a lot about in public works, which we didn't talk about as much here, was regulations can change in the future. And we're at this point right now because regulations change and it's forcing this decision, which, could actually turn out, I think, beneficial in some ways. But, we could we could reestablish the dam, repair it and look at it, reverberating it like that. And then regulations could change in the future. They could put in additional requirements around stormwater capture, and then maybe be right back where we started again. So moving back to the natural river state, it's where that.
I mean, look, one of the things you talk about in the lane is making the mind book the centerpiece of this town. I think this is consistent with that vision.
You're probably familiar with daylighting of streets, and so that's kind of what Chad is referring to, the daylighting the mind book as it comes through the center of town. So that is one of our goals as well.
Oh, nice.
So that would probably be a great
Fantastic with this, you'll expand the habitat of birds and native species tremendously. It would be huge for mine.
It's actually in the long range recreation area.
When you say daylight, you mean.
making it so you
You actually see it, it's not under.
Yeah. Does that also mean making it non-weedy or? I hate these.
It requires some maintenance enough, but you can do it that way with daily.
So when I think of daylight, I mean making it pristine. It's not environmentally pristine.
It just means putting what's in a pipe open to the sky again, basically, because I did a large scale on a trip several years ago, and we did that, exactly, we just removed, 1,000 feet of pipe.
Yeah. I think it would be great.
Can we put the presentations or some
Yes.
information about them on the website?
Yes,
For public use?
We talked about that with Tom and just picking out the clips of the presentation so that the public can see it as well. And
Does
yeah,
anybody,
and they have to watch everything.
does anybody feel strongly to maintain with them? To maintain the pond?
I just like to see the financials, that's the thing.
So that's why that's what I think the next part we have to talk
Compare
about.
the numbers from what we think we might get in grants and the cost. I mean, clearly there's a cost of grant, but I just be interested.
I mean, the way that I look at that, Jake, 2.3, 2.6, those are cost neutral numbers.
Yeah.
And you've got, so I think this becomes my opinion, this becomes a personal decision, and we have, then, once we make that decision, we have to figure out the financials.
Well, I think it's, but what I'm getting at is I actually think it's a lot less if we, depending upon what we think the expected grants that we could get. It's no longer, it could be as 1.5, it could be $800,000.
Yeah, no, the borough wouldn't necessarily.
Plus you don't
spend it
have
to
the
one.
additional every 8 to 10 years, 500 and plus, which it could go up at any time, that cost. So we wouldn't be incurring that at all.
I mean, I'm asking that question because obviously we're on a bit of a clock with the state, right? If we are going to go down the path of grants, we need to have shovel-ready plans in place, and that takes time. So I guess the question.
Not necessarily, so you could
Okay.
get grants to fund the design and permitting, like I mentioned, Veterans Council in particular will fund design and permitting for dam removals, and there's a few others that will also do that, and but sometimes there's them. So sometimes you can go in with just a conceptual idea like what I showed in the slides, and that is sufficient for 17 grant money.
I mean, Doug, how much
And
time do we have?
that also shows DEP that we're moving forward.
So is that the threshold that we need to meet now? We have to show a path forward now that we have a dynamite stick in the dam by September 1st.
That's right.
Yes.
Progress is a
Did
tough
the
thing.
Public Works, did you guys consult with the Environmental Commission? Did they talk at all? I mean, John, I realize I can't talk right now, but did they talk during Public Works? Or?
When Mary Jane kind of gave the the timeline back when this initially came up, the EC was very involved with, evaluating the options and restoration of stream, without seeing any numbers or financials was their preference. So I'm happy to put it in front of.
Yeah, no, I did. We've got our meeting on Wednesday, so I just before making it again. I mean, I know we're not making a final decision right now. But I'd like to see their opinion as well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear just what the process is. So, consulting environmental commission, is there when a public hearing would be? Because there might be points of view around keeping the pond, which we might not be aware of.
Jack, what do we need to just do a resolution? What would we do to do this? If we wanted to move forward, what would be our next?
Yeah, I think the next step would be a resolution to prepare specs and start applying for grants. And at some point in time, you have to adopt an ordinance with appropriate funds for additional space or whatever source. But, they could all be done.
Kind of simultaneously.
Mary, is there a calendar cadence to grant funding?
Yeah, so they tend to release funding in the spring and in the fall. There's not much that comes out in the summer, and there's almost nothing that comes out over the winter time period. So if you are interested in pursuing things, you want to start to plan for the fall grant requests that are coming out. And I can't tell you which ones those are off the top of my head, but there will be a handful that will be eligible in that fall window, and then you'll have more next spring that you could add.
So if we had a resolution for the next meeting to just start that process, it's not a decision keeping or not, it's really to pursue grants and.
That's right, and I think to authorize the professional services contract to start on both the grant application and
Okay.
the specs.
Well, should we
So
decide?
then we have to decide.
Option.
Yes.
Before we even vote.
Yeah.
Can we do that at the next meeting?
Yes,
And then
we
just
can.
put this on for a 2-week period on the web for everyone?
Yeah, I think, okay, is Charlie there? He's in the audience, so maybe if there's something in the paper and put it on the website and allow at the next meeting, that in the public session, people can comment.
Right.
And have the resolution on the agenda so that if we feel like we're ready to move forward, we can at that point. Sounds like a plan?
It does. I can ask a couple more questions. My mind's going where Jay is, because I'm going right to the finance committee. Mary, plus minus best educated guess. What is our expected grant number
For this project.
for this
across
type of
all the
project?
different
What can we plan for plus or minus $500,000?
I would say you can probably plan to get about $1 million out of grants. I would think is a reasonable estimate.
So we'll plan $500,000, and then if it's $1 million, we all shake hands.
Right. That'll depend on some of those strategic partnerships and also where the money is available from NRDs and other things.
And the thing is, we don't have a choice, we have to choose.
Something.
Right.
So,
Right, and if you're willing to contribute money, that also, like I said, scores very highly on the match, because sometimes people don't have a financial match and then.
So we'll bring this to the finance committee for deliberation now, Jay, if you want, or anyone else wants to input in that process. Let us know.
Could you provide me with like areas that would show the impoundment area after maybe 2 years or 3, just a photo or two, and then that way people from the public have thoughts about well, what's it gonna look like really,
Yeah, absolutely.
than something tangible for them to see.
Sure.
It would be really nice to be able to use the Dome House for concerts and things. Right there, you can't walk there.
That's sort of I do
Droppings,
I mean, Mary Jane, I think there's an opportunity here to make this space part of our cohesive rec plan that we are.
Yeah, and make it very usable.
Usable in the centerpiece.
Yeah, and I didn't mention it, but the area of that grassland section that I had shown is about 1.5 acres. So you get a lot of additional land space maybe use those.
Even the fire department, now they have the space to do that. To do that barbecue over there, so much space.
Yeah, no, okay. Thank you both very much. Paul, thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. And it's a lot of-
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so we will move on to open session. So if anyone in the public would like to speak, Anthony will set the timer. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Just state your name and address. If you're on Zoom, you can use the little hand icon. Oh, I see your hand. Where is the best place for someone? Should they walk up?
Right in front of the owl.
Right in front of the owl, so come up.
Actually, I wasn't planning to speak, but I wanted to ask a question about the presentation. Can I do that?
Oh, it's a public session. Go
Okay,
ahead.
yeah, sure. Yeah. Jeff Hammond, Blitlock Court. Unusual to be on this side of, of things. One comment and then a question. The comment, if we want to make this the centerpiece of the town, which I fully agree with, we're going to have to do something about access, because without parking, people aren't going to really be able to utilize it. So I hope that's built into any plan that you all have. Is how do people get here? Because right now that's one reason why it's really, really underutilized. The question I had was, especially the area near the gazebo and on the train track side, it's really pretty wet. It gets really, really muddy. Does it make a difference one way or the other, whether you preserve the dam or remove the dam, whether that would have any impact on that wetness, or that's unrelated to the dam?
No, it definitely does. So with the impoundment in place, it keeps the water table artificially raised in the soil as well. So that keeps the ground soggier when the dam comes out. That will all lower, so you will have that area be drying up a bit more, yes.
Just made my decision. Thank you.
Good question,
Jeff,
Jeff.
I'm curious, why is that? You've tried to go over there before and.
Oh, it's.
It's been, actually, it's better than it was.
Well-
We did replace the pipe there, so it's.
I've been down there because of the, for example, the
River cleanup.
river cleanup and also the rain gardens. But also, even when we were considering putting the menorah there during the holidays, you can't. It's just too wet. It won't even sustain that edifice. So it's and if you walk around there, if you try to circumnavigate the pond, you need boots.
Somebody on the Zoom.
Oh, is there somebody's hand up? I can't see who here is.
Yes, hello. I had a question regarding the removal of the dam and the existence of invasive species in the area that Jeff is talking about, specifically the knotweed that is over on that side all along. And I was wondering if we did remove the dam, which seems to be the way that the council is leaning, would we have an opportunity to remove those invasive species in that area? Would it afford us an opportunity to do some mitigation of that particular invasive species over there, so that we could eliminate it, hopefully, from the area going forward, and replace it with native species, or have the area be more amenable to walking and not have this species that just keeps coming back year by year by year.
Carrie, what species are you talking about?
It's called knotweed. It's Japanese knotweed. And if you get to the wet part of on the far side of the bridge, which keeps washing out. I mean, I know we've put a lot of money into that bridge, and I don't know what the reasons are. I hope that will go away too. But when you get over to the far side, over by the fire department property and along the far side walking path, there is a species that looks like bamboo, but with a large leaf, sort of a heart-shaped leaf. And you can keep it low to the ground if you keep after it, but it will eventually grow to 15 feet high. And it's just a very, very invasive species. I know that's a wetland over there. It's a created wetland, but given the fact that it is a designated spot wetland, it has been a difficulty for us over time, and of course you can't use any pesticides. I mean, who would want to? There's open water right there, but it takes over that entire side, both on the right and the left side of the walking path, all the way down past the lower bridge. It's just a really big problem. And I was just wondering if we might be able to get it out of there while we're working on this project and creating a little bit more dry space on both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with invasive removal, that's really common. With the dam removals, in particular, U.S. Fish and Wildlife will provide a lot of support on the invasive removal post restoration. That goes along with the vegetation and the plant donations that they provide. So yes.
Oh, great. That would be great, because we have done a lot of work on creating native species on the drier side of the pond. But on the other side, although we've done it, there's areas that we just haven't been able to touch, and all we've done is just chop it back. But it takes a serious amount of work to get it out, and I think this would afford us an opportunity to do that, and that excites me, because I think over time it's going to be better for my shoulders and elbows than the conditions now. But thank you very much for the answer.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. Anyone else wish to be heard?
Yes. First one, Chris Kavanaugh.
Chris? Yes. See your hand up.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. And I'm sorry if I missed part of the presentation. I was in transit here, but just a quick question for everyone. Does typically 150 years ago, to use that type of manpower and resources to build the dam would have been a pretty massive undertaking for human labor and ingenuity. Question is, why did they choose to use a dam at that time? And why are we now feeling that just a free raining stream would be adequate?
The building that we're in today was at one time a gristmill and at one time a lumber. They used it to,
I don't know if you.
I can't hear.
Can you hear him? Can you hear Doug? No, maybe you want to come up and answer, Doug. This is Doug Walker, our facilities manager.
At one point, the Borough Hall was actually a grist mill, and another time it was a lumber mill. So the water was, channeled to use to turn the grist and,
Okay.
I'll take.
It had a use,
Yeah,
it was productive. And
Okay, that's quite sensible. I just didn't know if there was additional reasons around it. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And Mary, I think in terms of I know there's been a lot of dams removed. What are some of the original purposes of some of them?
Most of the dams in New Jersey and this part of the country were for milling. That's the primary use of these run-of-the-river structures, because it was used for the hydropower piece. Their other uses vary, but a lot of times it was primarily focused on mills. So a lot of tilt bases and mill dams all around New Jersey and Pennsylvania.
Okay, thank you. Johanna, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, and someone should verify, but in 1974, it was re-engineered, and it was decided to, even though it wasn't used for the mill that it was in the ancient times that we were just told about, but it was intended to be a flood reducer. That was the purpose of the council at that time spending the money. I remember what it looked like. Before that, it was like a hole. So at that point, and you can make your own judgment about it, but it was intended to take care of some flood issues, to contain that water. That's what was done when it was redone in 1974.
Thank you. I'm not sure how that would work.
What that someone must know about that, because I spoke to the engineer about it at the time. Yeah, and that is what was told to me.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you. Okay. Any other comments from the public? No.
Can I ask, Chris? You asked a question. Did you have an opinion?
Oh, well, thank you for coming back and asking. Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, generally, I just get cautious about undoing things that have been in place for hundreds of years before making a big change. That's all. So, just as long as everyone is eyes wide open about, implications and what could happen and maybe the original intentions, then I'm very satisfied. It's just, anytime you move into a neighborhood and it's, you're on top of a mountain, but it says it's River Road, like someone 100 years ago named it that reason for a reason. And usually it returns with vigor when you least expect it. So that's why, if this dam really didn't have a full ability to block, say, flooding, then we understand it really can't serve that purpose, and we understand it. But if there was some benefit at the time that people felt, necessitated doing that labor, then we should just simply acknowledge it and understand, if what we're doing now would have some implications down the road. That's all. So I'm very satisfied. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Mary, would you mind talking about that? Because we did talk about that in public.
Yeah, I was gonna say, one of the things we discussed in the public works meeting was regarding the flood storage. So right now, there's no storage capacity behind the spillway. I don't know, we were talking a little bit, amongst ourselves here about if there was a different outlet structure. The only time I've seen flood storage in a run-of-the-river dam is if it's, flash boarded type outlet structure where you can raise and lower the water level artificially, and sometimes you can have additional storage by doing that. I don't think the structure was ever like that here, but with the removal, what we gain is all the additional volume that can fit in the channel up to the new bank elevation, and then all of the additional area that's currently underwater in the pond, that would become floodplain and have access during a flood. So we don't see a significant flood reduction, but we also don't have any loss of flood storage. We gain storage area.
Now, Mayor, if I could add to that for just 1 second. Yeah, the dam as it sits today, the water goes over the spillway all the time, which means the water flowing in equals the water flowing out. So there really is no meaningful flood storage associated with the dam at this point.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Jack, do we have to worry about any kind of, by removing the dam, do we have to do any kind of assessment on liability of something goes wrong and we end up having a lot of water spill downstream? What's downstream? Do we have to worry about sediment downstream? Do we have to worry about insurance, or potentially if there's a big storm and we don't have the dam? I realize it's not preventing any water from going downstream, but anything along those lines from a liability perspective that we should be thinking about?
I don't think there's anything you need to worry about protecting the 7th of the Claims Act. Also, you have insurance if there were nothing went wrong, but something could go wrong in storming as well. So anytime question project, we do have some potential.
One thing that I would also like to point out is that one of the elements of the dam removal design is that you have to demonstrate that you're not increasing downstream flooding. So that is a piece of the puzzle as part of the dam removal design is concerned.
Yeah, downstream
You're not
flooding, we have to
increasing
show that we're not
Which way
increasing,
the
yeah.
Yeah, and do we need to, I assume you have to inform the neighbors and all the people who are
Everybody
downstream?
gets notified for the permit application of the removal, and yeah.
And no issue, because you said sediment will have to go downstream.
A little bit, yeah. I don't, like I said, I was talking about the West Coast ones where they allow the full flood of everything. New Jersey doesn't allow that. So our dam here, your sediment primarily stays within the impoundment. We have to reshape a little bit, but the majority of the material that's there will stay there, post removal, except what's in the active channel.
So we wouldn't have to go downstream and clean up sediment.
No.
Okay.
But the water is going to be released over a 3 to 6 month period of time, so it's not like you just go.
So you're not
Yeah,
going
no,
out
no,
there to stick it iron and blow it up.
That would be a cheaper.
It is
Yeah,
cheaper for
yeah.
sure.
Right,
You don't have
anyone
no
else?
salmon on the micro, so, no salmon.
Oh, yes, the chief, Chief Valentine, yes.
Can you hear me, Mayor? Hello, can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes, yes.
Oh, thank you. I'm having some audio issues. I'm having some difficulty hearing everybody tonight. I just wanted to weigh in on this a little bit. I haven't heard anything discussed about the current hazard mitigation plan that the borough has in place with respect to the dam project. Whatever we do, whether the dam stays or the dam goes, we do have 2 existing projects identified on our current hazard mitigation plan, which is part of the Somerset County Hazard Mitigation Plan, which is approved by FEMA for potential funding in the future if mitigation funds should ever become available. One is the repair of the dam, and one is the replacement of the dam. And one of the things that hasn't been really discussed is what happens downstream. If I can just step back a minute, I've been here a long time now, and that pond has, over the years, has held a lot more water than it does right now. It used to be a lot deeper. The sediment has filled it in considerably from what it used to be 40 years ago. Before a storm, there was a gate valve that was on the dam. That dam would be lowered significantly. The water would be lowered significantly to reduce the amount of water that was in that pond to prevent flooding downstream with some of the rainfall that we have. The Brook rises and falls dramatically after severe rains. I've been here where there's been 12 to 14 inches of rain, and I've seen the water just about top the berm by police headquarters. But in the late 1970s in Hurricane Doria, the existing dam washed away and completely flooded the valley downstream of where the dam is now along 202. And there were, where there's some homes that were completely flooded down there along the 202 corridor. The new dam that was built in 1970 was built as a result of that flood. I believe it was damaged in Hurricane Doria, and the municipal building at the time was under, the whole first floor of police headquarters was completely destroyed, from what I recall being told back when, and under 8 feet of water. So I think there are some flooding concerns downstream that need to be taken into consideration to help us make a determination as to what the right thing to do is. We have significant stream bank erosion along the parking lot going down towards the sewer plant. There used to be a driveway with a culvert that crossed the stream. All the water went through a big culvert that completely washed away. Somewhere, I forget exactly when that occurred. It was prior to Hurricane Sandy. It completely washed away and was gone. Now the only next culvert that we have is Old Quarry Road. And it's the same thing. It's a small tube, it's a tunnel that goes under Old Quarry Road. So any water that comes rushing down Brook now, the first place it's going to be stopped if the dam is gone is the culvert at Old Quarry Road, which quite frankly, if you look around that culvert, if there's any examination that's been done, that's another hazard mitigation project that's on the radar screen for the borough. There's a lot of erosion, bank erosion and decay of that culvert, which, increased water coming up against that street and that culvert down there could cause that road to possibly wash away. I'm not an engineer. I've sat in on a lot of these discussions regarding hazard mitigation over the years. I am on the hazard mitigation committee for the borough, and all of these things have been talked about and identified. And I think that, no matter what we do, if the dam stays or the dam goes, we need to take a broader look at this as to what the impact is going to be to the borough property to protect our infrastructure, our police department, our road department, and quite frankly, our sewer plant that, we lose 2 or 3 or 4 feet of embankment every year to flooding as it encroaches on the driveway down there because the erosion is horrible on the lower driveway down along the sewer plant. It's something that I think needs to be taken into consideration with this project. That's all.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, I'm looking at the Google Earth. I think as we do this, we should really rethink.
Anybody else? Comments? Questions? Okay, I will close the public session. And we'll open the public hearing on ordinance 2022-1913, salary ordinance for employees of the Borough of Bernardsville or members of the Public Works Employees Association. Would anyone from the public like to be heard on this? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Christine, you want to move that one? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I move to pass ordinance 2022-1913 on final reading and adopt as published.
I'll second.
Roll call, please, unless there's comment, anybody? No? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Amlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Greenfield?
Yes.
Mr. McCready?
Yes.
Mr. McQueen?
Yes.
Mr. Romero?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I will now open the public hearing on ordinance 2022-1914, a bond ordinance providing for the improvement of various roads in and by the Borough of Bernardsville in the county of Somerset, New Jersey, appropriating $1.1 million therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $760,000 bonds or notes of the borough for financing such appropriation. Anyone from the public like to be heard on this? This is the Bernards Avenue project. Anyone from the public? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Diane, would you like to move this?
I move to pass ordinance 2022-1914 on final reading and adopt as published.
Second,
Discussion?
much needed.
Yeah, I know. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mayor?
I have to abstain due to.
Yeah, Fonzie.
Mr. Romero?
Yes.
Mr. McQueen?
Yes.
Mrs. McCready?
Yes.
Mrs. Greenfield?
Yes.
Mr. Amlin?
I must abstain also.
All right. Mr. McQueen, would you like to move the next ordinance?
Do we have a public hearing?
No,
Oh, this
we
is
just
introduction,
introduced.
sorry.
Yeah.
I move that ordinance 2022-1915 supplementing and amending chapter 2 of the Borough Code entitled Administration to allow council members to attend 2 meetings per year remotely and updating language. Be introduced by title, passed on first reading, published according to law, and that a public hearing be scheduled for a meeting between 7 p.m. Monday, May 23rd, 2023.
Have a second.
I'll second.
Any discussion? I think we talked this out pretty much last meeting. Thank you, Jack, for incorporating all our suggestions. I think this will just help us deal with this hybrid
Environment.
Here's just a quick question. Does this also codify the public attending virtually too? Or is it the public attending virtually too, or just about
It's
passing?
just deals with government.
Yes, the administrative code. Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Diane, would you like to move the next one?
I move that ordinance 2022-1916 prohibiting short-term rentals of residential properties and supplementing and amending chapter 3 of the Borough's Code entitled Police Regulations be introduced by title, passed on first reading, published according to law, and then a public hearing be scheduled for a meeting beginning at 7 p.m. Monday, May 23rd, 2022.
Second. Anyone? Well, good second first. Somebody second? Okay. This is, well, Diane, why don't you explain? This is from the house.
Okay, this is, we had nothing for if somebody had a short-term lease, such as an Airbnb or in a stash house where a bunch of people just start showing up at a house and stay for a week and then leave. Basically, this is just to put something in an ordinance form that we had. The police department could basically say, well, look, it's right here, you're violating this. There was nothing in there.
Why do we not want short-term rentals?
Short-term rentals meaning under 30 days.
I guess I'm not sure why we want to outlaw that in the borough.
I think the point, Bedminster had an issue, this is where it came from, where there was a large home, estate kind of thing, and the neighbors were there, parties, celebrations, family reunions, they were renting it out for, a family wants to come have something, and the neighbors complained, and we thought rather than deal with it after it happens, to have something in place, so we have.
So this came out of the housing and property maintenance and zoning.
Yeah.
Everybody,
I mean, my personal opinion, I don't like the regulate. If someone wants to rent their house out for a week, I'm not sure I would want to prevent that.
But does it prevent Airbnb?
It does.
That's Airbnb.
Yes. Why would you want, if you were a neighbor, why would you want to live next to somebody who's renting their house out to strangers every week? I mean, that's not, for a safety standpoint, from a noise standpoint, or a neighborhood standpoint. I mean, I don't think that people would really appreciate that.
Good point. I'm trying to think my neighbor.
Jack, where did you, you had gotten the sample for us. Where was it from?
This one came from Montgomery.
And they don't, they missed to put one in place as well.
Yes.
In the past year, have we had any issue in the borough of Bernardsville, where the police need a ordinance like this?
Good point, Jay.
How many times? And I'm not trying to, we don't know. I'm just, to Chad's point, I don't know if there's not a problem.
Right.
It could be a problem, I get it,
But
but,
if there's no ordinance, then police are told they can't do anything.
and that's what I'm
So
saying.
how do we know?
If
Well, the
somebody
police
breaks
would.
the law, you can do something.
Yes, but if there's no law to break, then how do you
No,
know?
no.
I guess the question is this a solution in search of a problem, or is there a problem?
Yeah.
That's the question.
I think it was more of a preventive, like a
It was a
proactive
preventative thing that came out of the housing advisory.
Yeah.
And it talks about penalties in the ordinance, but it isn't specified. I mean, maybe a question for the chief, I'm not sure, but what would the penalty be?
Right, all of our ordinances refer to the general penalty section of the community code. It's more efficient that way, and also penalties change over time, you don't have to go to the individual section. So basically, you're allowed to fine up to $2,000, does allow for community service or jail for 60 days, but that's never imposed for ordinance violations. So it just refers to the general section, as I said, for any ordinance violation.
Right. I guess we think there's plenty of great communities that allow Airbnb. You know, people, both renters and owners who are renting are respectful, et cetera. Very clearly in the scenario that you articulated, that is something we want to prevent, right? But I just think we have to be thoughtful about whether the impact of a blanket solution. That's all I'm thinking.
I'm just looking at, I mean, it is under police regulations. Should we send it to public safety to look at? And that way you can talk to the chief about whether or not if they've had any issues. Does that make sense?
That's what I
Yeah,
think.
just
So let's refer it to public safety for your next agenda. Yeah, and see if there's maybe there's an issue and we don't even know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's an issue that, I would be more receptive than if there isn't. Person, I'm just.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've known people to rent short term if their house is under construction, like the kitchen's being
Yeah.
done. and
Yeah.
It's happening, but it's, if I want to redo my kitchen and don't want to put myself through the renovation process, I've been in short-term rental in town 6 months.
Or even
Well,
30
yeah,
days.
that's
Well,
what-
30 days.
that's
is,
what we said,
yeah,
30 days.
anything over 30 days.
Um,
But relocation. When
Yeah.
I relocated to New Jersey, I stayed in an Airbnb in Short Hills for 3 weeks.
I know, and we want to, look, if you think of what kind of, you're gonna get executives that pay $30,000 a month for a house.
So it's good. So let's find out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if it's been an issue.
Public safety's opinion.
No, I think that's a good solution. Okay. Chad, why don't you move the next one?
I move that ordinance 2022-1917 appropriating $660,000 from the capital improvement fund for various equipment as listed in 222 municipal budget be introduced by title, passing first reading, and published according to law, and that public hearing is scheduled for meeting 7 p.m. Monday, May.
I'll second.
I have a question about this one.
Yeah,
Yes.
Just the EV vehicle for Public Works, are there EV vehicles already that Public Works has?
No, we don't have any, do we?
So my problem isn't with that, it's just, are there additional costs that will be incurred because we're authorizing the EV vehicle, like charging stations, et cetera, or do those already exist in the borough?
If there are additional costs that would be incurred, they have not been brought to the finance committee as you noted.
That's what
Yeah.
And
And that would.
I would assume that they're not going with an electric vehicle, they're going with
Hybrid.
Which would be gas, so the vehicle would need to my knowledge, need charging. We have an EV.
I mean, Tom is not here today, but I think if we can put that, Anthony, as a question for Tom, official question, because look,
Yeah,
Tom's pretty thorough, he doesn't usually miss things.
No, and probably those charges wouldn't qualify as a capital improvement.
yeah,
You know, it's not gonna cost that much if you come out of the regular budget.
that was my only concern, was just, is there other hidden costs that we
Yeah.
incur because we authorize aspects inside of this?
There could be, yeah, but that wouldn't be a capital expense.
But it would still be something that we would have noted in the budgetary
Yes,
process
right.
that we didn't.
We did.
So Anthony, if you
And we have time, because we're just introducing it now, so we can get an answer in time. Right, did I have a second? I have a second, yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No, abstentions were good. All right, we have resolutions 22-109 through 22-117. Questions on any of these? Or discussions?
I had a related discussion 12-112.
Yes, this is the packaged goods license that was at Geralman's, that has not been used for quite a while, and it has been purchased by, what is the Somerset? Yeah, which is Sam Nadali, who's a resident, and has plans to hopefully at some point open a store.
Okay. Jack, at what point does our because I understand liquor license in New Jersey to be population related, if that understanding is correct.
This is existing.
At what point can we apply for new licenses as a borough?
We're already over our limit.
Yeah, we're over our limit. There's some great other things.
This license is for sale only, not for serving, right?
Yes, it's just packaged goods.
It's just packaged.
Right. Congratulations, Leah Horowitz, well deserved. She has really been a real asset to the community, so that's great. As well, yeah, anything else?
Highlands Council, we should talk about 110, that's a step towards.
This is,
for the Highlands.
well, this is to do the facilities study, family facility study, to see if we are able to
Right.
join feasibility study, that's what it is. To see if we comply with what their master plan is. If we don't, then we don't join. If we do, then we discuss it. So this is, and we did get the funding for it. The advantage too with the Highlands is they have always have consistent grant money. They never are short of grant money. So if we are in compliance with them, then there's almost no reason not to join them.
We have to become under their jurisdiction and their master plan, which supersedes our master plan, so.
No, that's what the
If
study
they're,
will
well,
tell
if they're
us.
compatible, fine, if they're not.
Yeah.
Then we're giving up our power.
Well, no, you really, it's not that final, or that cut and dry. They have really loosened up there, and actually, if you have a project that you want to do and it doesn't fit into their plan, you can then withdraw, do your project and go back in. So they're not more flexible than they were, yeah. I think just because people didn't join, so they're really very open now to, and from our initial discussions with them, it seems like almost everything we're doing in town is consistent with what would the benefit be? A lot of grant funding and assistance.
What would the downside be?
The only is if we do a project that they say that isn't consistent, that we propose a project, they say we can't do it, and then we have to withdraw from them.
I see. Yeah, if they push our, so it wouldn't be something definitive like the open space plan But once something is purchased, open space money forever is owned by
No.
people that be able to say.
No. And the other thing, we did go over with them, Tom and I met with them, the Quimby Lane thing, and they were very supportive of that because of the increased parkland and opening the waterway. And so, they seem to be good with the things we are doing.
Well, this attitude seems to change.
Yes. Okay, somebody like to move them?
I'll move resolutions 22-109 through 22-117.
Give me a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ambrose.
Yes.
Ms. Greenfield.
Yes.
Ms. McCready.
Yes.
Mr. McQueen.
Here, yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera.
Yes.
The other thing is, if we, once we get the feasibility study, I would have them come and present, and so we can get those questions answered. And ask those kind of things, and what happens if, so, yeah. Oh, we were supposed to do this, not to be held before 8 p.m. Okay, so we are now at 8A, hearing on property maintenance at 107 Chestnut. This is you, Renee, yes?
Good
So,
evening, everyone.
hi.
We've kind of got to this point because we're kind of at the end of our, availability of resources to gain compliance in this property. This property, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it does back up to the ball fields, and it's very, very close to all the children back there, and we've had complaints from, either side neighbors that there's just, insects and rodents, and there's just, very large piles of just old rotted wood that, this homeowner had accumulated over time. More like firewood, so it's kind of stacked, almost like pallets. And it's kind of throughout the property. The house itself is in poor condition. It's, it's very sad to see it this way, because we've gotten complaints and it's just quite an eyesore. The biggest thing is the cleanup on the outside is what I was hoping, we could try to do, to request that lien. Really just getting into the summer months and children are going to be out and about more often. It just seems appropriate. We've tried to notice, there is no one living at the residence. So we just don't know what else to do. There's no one to really summon. So I know it going to the courts would just be a waste of everyone's time. So this was the other avenue to kind of try and police up the property, at the very least, what we can do for what's out there.
Renee, if you can summarize what you're looking for.
A property lien that
Just
will
for-
allow
Us to clean it
for
up.
us to put out a bid for a contractor to clean up the exterior of the home, which is really the large piles of firewood that have been accumulated, I think is the biggest concern. Because it does attract rodents and insects, and either neighbors about 7 feet away from this property. It fronts the road of Chestnut, probably only about 10 feet structure is. So it's very much close for pedestrians and children to kind of gain access to. There is no fence barrier, so there's no way to kind of keep anybody out. So it's just really just a safety.
So Jay and Al, I think you guys weren't here. This was something we put on the books about 18 months ago, which is a last resort for us as a borough. If we have a property that is derelict like this one is, that we can apply a lien and the town would fix what has to be fixed, and those costs will be incurred by the property.
On the taxes? How does
Yeah.
that work?
We put a lien on the property.
Okay.
So if they sold property.
Yeah, they have to pay it.
They have to pay it off.
We don't know, oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, Renee has submitted a report with photographs. I would ask that we be part of the record.
Mhm.
Then Mr. Brown is here. If he's not here, then you've got to decide if it's in the public interest to follow this procedure, in which case we'll have a resolution ready for the next meeting, authorizing the borough to do the work, and then submit it to the county and place a lien on the property for that amount.
And I believe, I think in your memo, it said that the neighbors think he went to a nursing home, the owner.
Right, that's kind of the census, and also the police department have also have the same, speaking of, with the neighbors.
Do we have any, I mean, have you looked at any way to see if there's a state that is managing the property? Because the property, if anyone, I have it up on Google Maps, it's right on our fields.
It is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And this may be something that the borough may want as property. Because it does have access to all, we talk about not having access to the back,
Yeah.
is this one here.
The tax assessor's office would have records of where tax bills were sent, so it is a.
And because we talked about the polo plan, it's this right here.
Yeah.
This would,
The access.
that would make a parking lot or some kind of access for ADA reasons for that back area. I don't know what just happened.
Yeah. it's not working.
It would, it's gone, it was there.
I had 3 questions.
yeah,
So,
I've researched for an estate. I've gone to the Somerset County records and tried to see if there was anything that has occurred with the title change, but nothing that I can seem to locate.
And somebody is paying taxes, though, taxes are paid. on it?
I believe they are not paid.
Jack, do you have any visibility as a legal representative into where this property is housed and is stated?
I mean, it's,
That can help us find the things that Renee may not find for public record.
Yeah, no, I think the assessor's office probably best, but we say whatever the tax bills are sent to probably best contact person.
but they're not being paid. is what Renee said.
Yeah, they're being sent somewhere, so.
Okay.
Yeah, we what we do in zoning and housing, we refer to the tax assessor's mailing address for any property. And it's the same mailing address as the physical property.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we just know it's going there, or maybe it's forwarded, but we haven't had a response.
So we can propose an amendment at some point.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. So let's just say that there's we can't trace ownership for how long. What are the steps?
Well, some of the steps will happen automatically. Leslie will file a tax sale.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after the tax sale, the borough can buy a certificate, and we can, as I said, we can foreclose in man, which is a lot easier. If you bought the tax sale certificate, you have to do it in persona, which means you have to find all the areas and anyone interested in the property. But what we can do is foreclose against the property. So it's a fairly complicated procedure, but we can get title if we're not paying taxes.
And out of respect to this poor gentleman, I'm sure things aren't good. So I'm not saying that we should. I'm just trying to understand the situation.
Family or anything.
Family, somebody's got to know something.
Yeah, we actually tried a couple of our internal resources that we've had, phone numbers from rental, housing, family members that then we match the names, with the last name, and kind of just try to put the pieces together, and we just.
About how long have we been trying? How long roughly have we been trying to get the house?
Roughly since the beginning of March.
That's about 2 months.
That's not long enough.
And we had, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Has there been, it's probably obvious, any type of recycling pickup, trash pickup, anything?
I mean, we monitor it pretty often, because we do several other inspections around town. There is no garbage to the curb, there's no lights
There's
on,
nobody living there.
there's just,
Everything.
there's definitely nobody living there.
So are we okay with a lien?
How much is it?
Yeah, I wanted to ask.
I don't think we have that yet.
Well, they have to get a bill.
Well, yeah, but you, is the borough gonna do the work, or are we RFPing it out to another company?
Contract.
I think Jack is probably best to answer.
Right.
We proceed.
I guess it's probably better.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna ask.
We did
You
this
didn't
once
have the
more.
manpower.
Right, we did it
Once-
internally before, and they put it out to bid, and
That's what I thought.
I suggest tonight we adopt a motion that it's in the public interest to agree to the situation, and then back at the next meeting, we do a resolution with details of whether it's going to be done in-house by public works.
Yeah, because I'd like to make sure John has the manpower and.
Yeah, okay. Somebody make a motion.
There's nobody here representing the property at all, right? Just wanna make sure.
Exactly, that's the first thing I'm talking about.
Anthony, and you'll make sure that Doug and John know.
So I'll make the motion.
What Jack said.
For what Jack said.
Yeah. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so then they can.
Okay.
All right. Oh, there's update. Okay. Not a whole lot. I attended Chief Valentine's LEPC meeting, which really went over what our requirements are for elected officials and everyone for OEM. I attended the New Jersey League of Municipalities Lunch and Learn that was on cybersecurity, and I shared those slides with all of you. It was very scary. How easily it is to get hacked. We did another ribbon cutting at Ken Rent last Saturday, I think it was. New owners, they've done a beautiful job. We had a chance to go into, I guess what was the tanning salon is now their store, and they've got a great selection there. We had our first branding meeting. We're working on coming up with a brand for the entire town, so we're not all using different things, and all our signs are consistent. And Adam Sperry of King Willie, that's on Claremont, has volunteered to help us with that. Yeah, and we also have Jerry Rizzo, Olivia Manning, Leah Horowitz, and Erica, who doesn't know, who hopefully will help us as well. New owners at R. Weiss Fine Jewelers in the Burnsville Center, so we did a ribbon cutting there. And I know, professional ribbon cutter. Just a reminder, the Somerset County Governing Officials Association is having a meeting this Wednesday at the Sahara Restaurant in Manville at 6:30. I don't know, you said you couldn't make it, so, and I'm not gonna be able to go, but if anybody else wants to, Anthony will do the purchase order. We did have the cutoff for the Outstanding Community Volunteer Awards. We had 8 nominations, 8 submissions for 4 people that got multiple ones, and they're 4 really good candidates. I'm not gonna tell you who they are yet. But Tom and I are working out how we want to do the award presentation, so.
Being one?
No, we usually name 3 or 4. If you look on that big plaque that's, as you're going down the stairs, there's usually 3 or 4 every year. So I think all 4 qualified, and the fact that they all got multiple nominations, I think speaks a lot. So hopefully in June, we'll have some kind of an official ceremony. So I didn't want to tell the people yet until we got that all worked out. And just a reminder, I will be away Wednesday until the 22nd. So Chad's your guy, but I should make it back for the next meeting.
Oh, so you're gonna be at the meeting?
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah, I know.
So
God
it's
willing,
wonderful.
don't rise, you know, I'll be.
You're gonna get COVID while you're over there.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, or just my plane or something, so, yeah. All right, we don't have a report from Tom, because he's not here. He's out for just this week. What's next?
Unfinished
Correspondence.
Oh, Court, we just got a letter today. And I had gotten this earlier. I think I had somebody had emailed it to me. I did pass it on to Tom and John and Doug, and they have gone up to the site and are putting together a whole what would you call it, a drainage plan for that area. So
Sorry, I didn't see the email, but.
this is Overly Road. They were saying that they've got an issue with
There's a number of.
water drainage runoff.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
so,
runoff from Mountaintop, there's a number of people on Overly, and
Yeah.
I think Mountaintop that have complained about drainage problems since the road was paved.
yeah, so they are on it. They're dealing with it. Tom said he was gonna reach out to the people, so I'm hoping that they did that. And let them know that we are working on it.
I think there was a letter.
Yes, we just got it.
No,
today.
of his letter, the Thompson.
Oh, Tom sent a letter to them. Okay, so they should have gotten an answer. Do we have any other correspondence? I don't think we have.
This kind of letter is part of both record, there's no problem to share with the environmental commission.
No,
Right, they're-
yeah. Any unfinished business?
Yeah, I was gonna do something close that I think we can do in open.
Okay.
John Zabos prepared an ordinance up the end of the housing sites. I was gonna discuss in closed session whether we should introduce it here before the council and then before the planning board, send it to the planning board first. And then before the meeting, I got an email from John Zabos strongly recommending that we introduce it here and then send it to the planning board.
I think that has worked.
So if that's acceptable to you, why don't we introduce it at the next meeting and put it on the agenda?
Okay,
Then we'll refer it to the planning board and I'm sure they'll make some changes.
That sounds like a good.
excellent, okay.
And that's all I have to exact is that.
Okay, good, thank you. Do we have any new business?
Not anymore.
Okay, I mean, Christine had asked about noise, we were talking about noise.
Yes, and the chief asked me to, they're gonna talk about it in public safety this week.
Garbage trucks in the morning. we do get
Because-
complaints about.
Our noise ordinance has a distinct start. And I guess there's some commercial activity going on at properties that's noisy, which is picking up of dumpsters. And I hear it. It's at
In the
4 or 5
downtown,
in
it's
the
very loud, like behind the stores and.
So it's like 4 AM. I mean, I could get up at 5. So it doesn't matter, I mean, that much
Yeah.
for me, but in the summertime, it's not gonna be very good.
Yeah.
It is loud enough to wake you up. So the chief said to give him some time to investigate. And then
Isn't there a certain time that they have to?
they have to wait
I'm
until
not thinking it's 4 in the
7.
morning.
No, 7 is
It's 7.
when
Seven
they
AM.
do stuff, construction, yeah.
7 on weekdays, I think weekends maybe a little bit later, 8.
8, it is 8.
And,
yeah.
so 4 is not good.
But it's just whether it's considered construction noise, because that's what the
So,
ordinance says, right?
Well, the ordinance gives decibels, so, I mean, anyone who has
that
a,
type of work. right? So
anybody
picking
who
up
has an
garbage.
iPhone can measure decibels.
The ordinance doesn't cover that construction.
But it's
I
picking
I
up
would suggest
garbage,
we amend it to supplement it.
that's a good idea.
I know some towns do have that kind of ordinance.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I would say that's a good idea.
Yeah, because that's, even sometimes, the leaf blowers start before 7.
And they say it's not construction.
Yeah, so, yeah, maybe we should look at amending the ordinance.
So, well,
Well, talk about it in public safety and then we'll bring it forward. Okay. So we're not having, Ed, we don't have another public session, but if you want to say something,
Please, here because of the blackout.
is it what?
The blackout on Anderson Hill.
now,
There's the
Power's
power
out.
is out?
Yeah,
Well, it's been out since 3 o'clock this afternoon.
I did not know that. And all of Anderson, well, that's good.
not my
See?
house.
no, my house is out as well.
You are?
What number are you?
I'm on Linwood.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
I'm on Sycamore Hill.
Yeah.
Did you even get a pause?
Do we know why?
I was at Kiwanis when it went out for baseball and I stopped by and my generator was running and I don't know why.
of generators running.
Yeah,
Very noisy.
yeah.
Can we get an answer from
Do we
JCP
know
now?
why or we don't?
You want me to- I can call my wife.
Yeah, I can tell you the answer because I stopped at the desk downstairs to find out what was going on. And they, because I called JCP and they said, no, you can't talk to him. But in any event, I've had that before. The police have been put on notice that the estimate is 11:30 tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
But we still don't know the reason, though.
Is that still up or is it new? Chief?
No, that's me, Mayor. No, the power went out about 3:30 this afternoon. They had some equipment issues. They have an entire phase that went down. They're working, I was told, on Anderson Hill Road right now. They're trying to get the equipment repaired and restored. They're hoping to have it back up by about 10:30 tonight, but they will not. They don't like saying that because you never know what they're going to find or what's going to happen. But that's, what I heard right now. Approximately 120 people are affected by the outage up the Anderson Hill Road, Mendham Road corridor and some of the adjoining streets and areas there. you can go on their website and get restoration updates on the JCP&L website. You can monitor the outage and the estimated times of restoration as well on their website.
They're here working on it now.
They were working on it. I've seen the trucks up there. I don't know how far along they've gotten. You know, sometimes these things go up and down the line. You know, one transformer comes on, another one pops up the line. They have to go fix that. They're running around up there right now. Hopefully by 10:30, I did get off the phone a little while ago with our JCP representative who said, you know, they're working on it. Hopefully by 10:30, they'll have it fixed, but they can't, you know, they can't say for sure.
For these equipment issues typical?
I'm sorry, what?
These equipment issues typical?
Well, they happen all the time. Can be a squirrel, it can be a bird, it can be a bird's nest, it can be weather related, it can be a tree limb comes down and causes a short, causes a fuse to pop. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can cause this. They don't give us the exact details or tell us exactly what caused it. Sometimes they don't even know. The people that we talk to don't even have that information.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for the update. Is that?
We usually get,
Yeah, usually they send an email or something with an estimated time.
this is our version,
Yolanda, yes. Hold on. Okay, usually I get something that tells me how many people are out and I didn't. I'm sorry, Ed.
You can come to my house, 28 Anderson.
Do you have a
It's on your
generator?
way home.
Do you have a generator or you don't?
No,
Oh,
the chief does it.
oh, that's right, he's on Woodwood, yeah.
Do you have like a
Go knock on his
medical, like
door.
a life supporting equipment or anything going on at home?
No.
You need a generator? Because we could get you one if we have.
I forgot that the library closes at 9 instead of 8. I went down to the library at 10 after 8, and the lights are all on, the cleaning crew's there.
Yes.
So I said, are they gonna are they hosting the people who are blacked out?
Oh,
Cleaning crew doesn't even speak English.
yeah.
So the upshot of that is that I came down to the desk because I've been there before, and the desk, the chief maintains the desk down there, and she said she knew there was a blackout, but she didn't know the details. It took her 3 minutes to find the details. So she said that the chief's upstairs. I said, what's up? She said, it's a council meeting. Oh, I said, come sit in council.
Well, I enjoyed that. Actually,
Glad you
he's
did.
on Zoom, but yeah. Well, I'm glad we could give you some light for a while. I wish we could make a meeting go longer, but you know, we're done.
Ed, I'm actually downstairs in the office. I'm here, I'm in the building. The audio is horrible, but if you have a long extension cord, if you want to plug in, you're welcome to.
Okay. I think we're done.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. No close. We're adjourned.